Oromo bontu bareedu shanyaalima bareedu shanyaalima bareedu shanyaalima bareeda shanyaalima bareedu shanyaalima bareeda shanyaalima bareedu shanyaalima bareeda shanyaalima shanyaalima bareedu shanyaalima bareedu shanyaalima bareeda shanyaalima bareedu shanyaalima bareeda shanyaalima bareedu shanyaalima
harka fuune assalamu alaikum nagani rabbi isini walin haa ta'u jecha gara programa keenyaatti gad deebina duraan dursee ammas irraan deebi'a adde faantu nagayaan baganaa dhufte bareedduuti yaa haadha ilmaan babbareedduu warra keenya nu guddisuu jirta nu jiraadhu akkasumatti illee keessumaa keenya Dr. Berry baga nagayaan nu dhufte kabajaa teenya guddistee as dhufuu siitiif hedduu galatoomfanna mee takka hamilee nu kannaaf isaan lachuufu hamilee galatooma isinillee yaaminsa guddistanii asii kan nu dhuftan hedduu isin galatoomfanna duraan dursee namni nin galatoonfachuu barbaadu programni kun akkamitti Dr. Berry asii yaamne xiqqoon isinii ibse warra waa barate ijoollee teenya keessaa anaaf ijoolleetii yajarri hundinuu wanna qaban kilaba book study qabani book study sun odoo dubbisaniiti buka dubbisanii baatitti haa ta'u hanga isaan wal arkan hin beeku wal arkaniiti buka sunirraa haasawan waan irraa baranii fi waan irraa arkatan faayidaa isaa jarri kun jara hanga tokko ijoollee Oromoo teenyaati oduma buka adda addaa dubbisanii buka Dr. Berry dubbisanii waa baran irraa waan nuti isaan hin barsiisne waan dur hin beekne hunda irraa baraniiti akka dhaamsi kun nu gayu kan godhe akka waan kana qopheessinee kan godhe Dr. Ilyas Ussootii fi Maawardi Hamid galatooma dhaamsa keessan Dr. Naomi nu ergitan nu ga'ee jira amata takka nurraa fuudhe immoo arra isinii qopheessine galatooma isiniin janna itti fufa hedduu barbaachisaadha mee hamilee naa kannaaf isilee hanga haasawuu eegalleef turree jirra irraa tursiisnee asiin geenye gaa galatoomi isin janna as dhufuu keetir afaan Oromoo amma karaa kaaniin deebi'a thank you for coming for this invitation and then I just want to say thank you to Dr. Berry and Adde Fantu and Dr. Awon who came without really not knowing when they come to this city, but they came and at least participate with busy program. And I want to say special thank you for Dr. Ilyas and Maawardi and Naomi who really let us do this thing, and they find out by reading with the book club. And they found the book is very important to know for the young people and for all of you. So it took us about a year to do this thing, but finally we did it. And thank you, Dr. Ilyas, and Maawardi, and Naomi. Thank you. A special thanks to who did this program, really do it, is our president, Nawat. She worked really hard to get to this. Thank you, special thank you to you. And thank you, yeah. And Amale Galatoma, Afan Oromotin Garagalcha, Wara Kanyani Hunukupau, Baki Hunubare, Duhogore, 1,000 Jurtan, Lina Abdi Galatomi, Dakret Nugodu Khetif. Amale Waranyata Wali Rira Wali Babase Nukupe Sejra, Magani Sani Heduda, Isintufa if Beitani. Galatoma is ninjana hangaya da yama hangama warana kane malkun asuma nahili iftu ilili منيرة منى حاجي إسان تفانو مي غلطوما نانجا qabeenya keessaniin akkana qopheessine galatooma isin jenna amma nama jarjara deemuuf deemanii programni keenyallee karaa addaa ture amma karaa Dr. Perrytiin isin deebisa obsaan nu caqasaan. Thank you. You could come to me.
Galatoma Zaytuna, thank you so much. Oh, what a joy and honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to the Eastern Oromia Women's Organization, specifically Nebat, and as the president for inviting me, and Naomi for hosting me, and for all of your kindness and generosity. I appreciate it. What I'll be doing for the next 30 minutes is hopefully just showing you some beautiful pictures. You can enjoy your meal, or you can listen to some of the things I have to say. I'm going to read a little bit, and then I'm going to just, two mics, try to just talk about some of the images. I know that the goal of this presentation was really to introduce young people who haven't spent much time in Oromia, who maybe don't speak the language, who don't dress like their mothers, reference to the book, to enlighten them a little bit. So this is really for them, for that younger generation. And those of you that know this and know it much better than I do, I appreciate your patience. I also appreciate your feedback. So anything that you want to tell me or share with me or correct that I have to say, I very much welcome it. So I've been doing research in Oromia for the last 25 years. I'll be introducing that in a bit. But let me just say that my work overall, and I'm sorry with the mics, if you can't hear me, raise your hand. My work involves the intersection of dress, identity, and belief system. In other words, how do personal arts communicate one's sense of self and one's understanding of their place in the world? The very nature of this expression is performative and embodied. So I've argued that performance, in its broadest sense, is a means for embodied resistance. Resistance against authoritarianism, colonialism, patriarchy, all that stands in the face of living a free and equal life. I'm advancing and it's not doing anything. Do I have to do it down here? Let's see. There we go. So just some general eyes. So since the late 1990s, I've documented and written about Oromo women's roles as peacekeepers, warriors, cultural ambassadors, mediators, storytellers, artists, and spiritual teachers through the personal arts and performances they most value. The initial research question, why do women invest such great time, energy, and resources on their personal arts, helped guide me toward the performative context where dress becomes meaningful. These include life cycle rituals and prayer ceremonies for such things as healthy children, rain, and an end to violence. In other words, art becomes meaningful when it is activated on the body, and most often today on the body of women. You should be able to see, you can't read that, performance as resistance. So I've thought about performance as resistance. In an authoritarian system, there are a few social and economic institutes that are outside of the government's control. Authoritarianism, a way of governing that values order and control over personal freedom, has pervaded the local, state, and national levels in Ethiopia. Women in particular are faced with all sorts of particular issues, particularly trauma. Herein I will suggest that performance as a means of expression is one area outside of the control of the regime. It can be a subversive space of resistance. It is significant at this juncture. And I'll give you one example. This one's a little bit dated, but you see here a poster that was in Finfinne advertising Nations and Nationalities Day, right? On your right, you have a Harari or a Dari woman, right? And on your left, you have an Oromo woman. This woman on the left is Aisha. She's actually on the cover of my book. And so the government took this photograph, I don't know how they got it, and used it for this poster. They used it without my permission, so I was both honored and horrified at the thought, right? What happened, though, at the time that this was put up, so you see here that she's on the cover, painted so beautifully by Edesa Poggia, a Oromo artist in Seattle. You'll see that she's wearing red, green, and red thread on her forehead, right? And so when this one went up, which was in 2016, social media went crazy, right? Because the government had chosen a photograph to advertise Nation and Nationalities Day where the model was wearing the colors that were illegal at the time, right? Within, I don't know, a day, someone had gone on up with a ladder and painted white over her forehead. Yeah, so you can see that in the image. So in no time at all, those colors, very simple yarn on her forehead had been erased. And so I present this here for us to think a little bit about the importance and the role that dress plays. And I'd also like you to think critically about who controls representations of Oromo culture and who enacts or performs it. In this case, the need to whiten 3 simple stripes of color suggests the government was keenly aware of the significance of dress and performance. This is an age of national branding in Ethiopia. In advertisements on billboards or on social media, tourism, government websites, how do you want to be represented, and how would you like others to represent you? So fieldwork for me began early in the late 1990s. I was most recently there in 2016, but very shortly. And these are the different areas that I went and lived. It took me just under 6 months to get clearance to even do the research initially. So I came as a Fulbright scholar. I had all sorts of letters, but because I was working on an Oromo project, nobody would give me clearance. So it took a long time to do that. How did I get research clearance? By couching it in terms of women and dress, something that seemed benign, and I got away with it, so to speak. So I spent time first in Eastern Hararge and then shorter trips to places like Arsi and Wollo. And so I've been looking, as an art historian, I'm trained to look at art objects first and foremost. I've been looking at the tracing of something called consistency and change, right? How has dress evolved in about the last 150 years due to religious, political, and economic circumstances. I feel like my volume is going up and down. Is this okay for you, or should I could get someone to try to put it on, hold it for me maybe. So the earliest works that I was using really come from Philippe Palitschke, an Austrian ethnographer who was taking photos in Eastern Hararge in the 1880s. So what you find is women wearing leather, and then the movement toward cloth, or sadeta, the woven textiles. And so I sort of couch dress into these historical periods. That's what I write about in the first part of the book, looking at how dress shifts and changes at these different moments, and also how it becomes a subversive political voice as well at these different times. When I very, very first time in 1996 went to Harar, Eastern Hararge region, I was really amazed at the time and energy and resources that girls and women spent on their bodies. And I questioned what that was all about. These women, or these girls in the marketplace, are poor by Ethiopian standards. And so for them, when they're earning less than 50 cents a week, why would they be spending money on beads and cosmetics and things like that? And so that was the initial research question. A chot seller, for example, might make a little bit more than that, but even so, a strand of seed beads in the market costs the equivalent of 50 cents. The woman here, she's wearing no longer scars or tattooing on her face, she's wearing kula, she's putting color on her face, nail polish. And at the time I was doing my research, she would not be putting nail polish on her nails, which was not a culturally appropriate place, but rather on her face as a form both to enhance her features and be attractive for suitors and others, and also to repel those who might be seen as dangerous, those that are strangers or those that have Buddha. Notice she's also wearing a key. So many women wear keys, not because, I know that this woman doesn't have a house with a lock, but rather the key is a power symbol. So it's something that suggests she has something of value hidden away. The marketplace in Babile, here these women are wearing sadeta. They have just a polyester t-shirt from China over the top of it. These are Muslim women, and they are wearing the dress of their foremothers underneath that shirt in the form of the sadeta. In Harar, I was interested in the way in which there are 4 ethnic groups living in Harar, the Adari, the Oromo, the Somali, and the Argoba, and yet they're so distinct. So men in that region, men look the same. They have a Indonesian wrap, and they wear a button-down shirt, but women were very distinct. And so for the Oromo wearing the karma made out of silver, and the Harari or Adari woman wearing the same but out of gold in this case. So I'm going to go through some body art practices to sort of familiarize you with some, to talk about them a little bit in relation to what they mean. And I'll start just with hatita. Hatita or scarification is not something practiced much anymore today, but historically it was done for a variety of reasons. In this case, to visually lengthen or beautify the nose. It was also done over the eyebrow to, if you had eye disease, if you had something in your eye, to allow the blood to cleanse the eyeball. But it could also be a way of harnessing the gaze meaning your eye contact with someone. So if someone in the marketplace was thought of as vulnerable or dangerous, adding a scar simply could direct or harness the gaze in that place in the face. You also see tumtu, which is the tattooing, the tum, that practice of adding pigment into the scar on the woman on the lower left. It's subtle. It's not meant to be. It's almost like you have to look twice to see if it's even there, right? And so the use of hatita and tumtu largely dissolves in this region due to sheikhs in the mosque saying not to do this practice. And then we find the next stage would be kula. Kula is interesting, right? Kula is done on the face in the same place we find hatita and tumtu, but it's also a way for a girl, a young woman, to be an individual. So she's choosing her color, she's choosing her pattern, and a bottle of nail polish, that costs a lot of money. That could be a week's worth of labor just to buy a bottle of nail polish. And she's choosing the color, she's choosing her own design. So in a way, it allows her to individualize and accentuate, but again, it's the place that's appropriate on her face. Not on her nails, but on her face. Here's one more example of that. So the dots are a little bit bigger there. Another item of dress that I saw a lot when I was living in Eastern Hararghe is the ambarca necklace. I brought a few here. This is a kerosene seller in Jarso in the marketplace. She comes weekly to sell kerosene, and she is wearing the ambarca. Ambarca necklaces are made out of seed beads. Again, these are not cheap to buy the seed beads and to make these necklaces. I was very naive when I first went. I asked a woman, where can I buy one? And she was astonished that I would want to buy one. No, there's no way that she was going to sell this to me, right? Ambarca necklaces are individualized by women. When a woman dies, her daughters will unravel the necklace and use the beads again. It is not an item that's for sale, at least then. This was 25 years ago. Today, you can actually find some for sale. I have some. But I didn't, other than asking about sort of economically and how do they make them, I didn't really ask the question about the design, right? Because what does this design look like? It looks like Oromo baskets. Oromo baskets have that same pattern, that diamond shape that's bisected, right? When I finally asked about the pattern for this necklace, do you want to guess what people told me it was called? Afran Kalo. Afran Kalo. This is the 4 sons of Kalo. right? So embedded in this pattern is a reference to genealogy, to land, to a whole host of things that are pretty important, that if I hadn't asked that question, I wouldn't have known. But people in the region know. They know and they understand the language of dress, so they understand what she's carrying by beading Afrankalo into her beaded necklace. So here you see it on baskets, and then here you see it close up in the necklaces, and I have some of those here in those registrars. Another item here, karmalote. So this is a headband that originally, during the time of the Egyptian occupation, was made out of silver, pure silver. So made out of the Maria Teresa taller. I brought a real one and I brought some fake ones here. The Maria Teresa taller was used by smiths who would melt it down and create a whole host of things. All of these pieces, filigree pieces, made by smiths, very old. So the first karmalote was made out of silver. And women talk to me about it, grandmothers talk to me about it, as something that both enhances the face, right? It draws attention, but it also draws it away from the eyes. When the Egyptians left Harar, they took with them sacks and sacks of silver. Much of the Maria Teresa tallers were taken. And the Oromo population actually got poorer after that. And so we find that what was originally made out of silver has changed. So the next iteration would be bead, so chale karma, make the beaded headband, and now even more so what you see in the upper left is a metal spooling, the kind of thing you could find here at Home Depot, right? Very simple, easy to buy in the marketplace. You don't need a smith to make it anymore. You can simply get it yourself. And so here's that image again of Aisha. She's wearing the chale karma along with the stripes made out of yarn across her head. The kartasa is usually the first object that a child is given, even before they're given clothes. A kartasa is a case, right? In the case of this girl, a kartasa exists as a folded piece of paper, a simple piece of paper that has Quranic verses written on it, and then is folded up. The ones that I'm wearing are worn by both the Oromo and the Argoba, and inside of here is a medicinal substance. It has to do with some kind of plant. And whether it's medicine, in other words, whether it's a plant or whether it's a piece of paper, right, what is it doing? What is an amulet doing? An amulet is a protection. It protects you by what it is holding, because we actually don't know what is inside of it. So the power is not knowing. It's the encased, the hidden, that makes it so potent and so powerful. So giving it to a child, protecting a child after they're born, giving it to someone that is prone to illness, giving it to someone who's very weak, happens quite a bit. Here's a detail. This is an Argoba woman wearing the kartasa necklace. And in addition to the leather pouches that are sewn shut, tightly sewn, you also have a host of other things. So you have metal, you have cowrie shells. Mine has metal. So in addition to having the power of the amulet, it also has the sound, right? So if you're coming into the marketplace, and there is the potential for danger, you have that sound to alert. I've actually been in marketplaces where women with little children, when a stranger or a smith, someone that might have Buddha, have the evil eye, covers the eyes of those children to protect them. So the amulet is another form within that pantheon of objects that protect. And you see these girls, they're not wearing kartasa, they're wearing coins. So they're either wearing replicas of the Maria Teresa taller or buttons. Again, these things are meant to divert the gaze. So if you meet them in the marketplace and it's bright outside, right, the shine, the glare is going to catch your eye. Your eye goes first here, and then it's okay to look that person in the eye. Two women here who we know are married. We know they're married because of the gufta that they're wearing. I brought in one of the hairnets there with the ileli, the little dots on it on the net. Putting your hair into the balls is something that happens at marriage. A mother will do this for her daughter in some cases. And over time, as she ages, those balls begin to descend. So you can even talk about age just by looking at the art there. And the woman also is wearing a fake Maria Teresa taller, in other words, a reproduced, and a key, as I mentioned earlier. So what I'm looking at, what I'm trying to teach my students at Cal State Northridge, where I work in Los Angeles, is that dress is a form of nonverbal communication. If you understand the language, you know what they're trying to say. So you can look at a woman, she never has to speak, no communication, and you can tell approximately how old she is, what her religion is, her political beliefs, her economic status, how many kids she has, whether she's married. All of that without her ever saying anything. So for my students, a lot of what they, in the classroom, I ask them, what can we tell about each other just by looking at what we're wearing? And there's a little bit of information, a wedding ring, things like that. But here, you can tell almost everything about someone just by what they're wearing. So embedded in what I've been saying is kind of this idea that there is tension in the Oromo aesthetic system. In other words, young women have this paradoxical responsibility to be both beautiful and attractive and want suitors, right? And also to be somewhat concealing and reserved and protective of their bodies. And so we have these sort of dichotomies between attracting versus repelling, and even beautifying versus disfiguring. There's some cases historically, for example, when Haile Selassie's soldiers were coming into villages and taking young people, and many Oromo didn't know or didn't understand why these people were being taken, they scarred their children heavily, and they found the soldiers left them alone. So we find periods of time in which heavy scarring is actually done in order to protect. The woman in this photo, she's wearing sadeta with that polyester shirt on top. She's wearing ambarca and other beads, and she's wearing paper. In this case, she can't afford the leather case, but she can just have the paper on her necklace, which might have some Quranic verses on it. So in terms of my work and what I tried to document in the book, I've looked at particular body art practices, but I've also looked at particular movements and what's been happening in Ethiopia, in Ethiopian history, to the Oromo in Oromia over the last 100 years or so. So these women are not in Oromia, obviously, but I loved the beaded piece that she has where she's beaded Oromia onto it. And I'm sorry that the text was in white, and I don't know if it didn't save, but what I'm showing you here, you all know already. This is the symbol of Oda. And so the proliferation of Oda is something I've written and published about in other places. This is something that you've all seen and experienced. And so again, just like Ambarca referenced the Afrankalo, the Oda references land, right? Ancestral land that may or may not be available anymore as more and more Oromo are losing rights to their ancestral land to multinational corporations. So the Oda is a symbol of one's position. And I wanted to read something or share something that the historian Badri Kabir told me about in relation to Oda, because he did research on Oda about 30 years ago. He said the tree is always located in a source of water, a symbol of fertility and the site of rituals of thanksgiving for prosperity and blessings. Secondly, Oda is unique in that the tree regenerates any loss to its trunk. In this manner, through forgiveness and prayer, the Oromo assembly always grows back and thrives in spite of the loss of a member. In addition, many varieties of plants flourish under the canopy of Oda, and in this vein, the Oromo support, protect, and sometimes adopt minorities and orphaned family members in their midst. Lastly, the sycamore tree is unique in that its fruit ripens at different times. Birds eat the ripe fruit and drink the water held in the unripe fruit. The tree is therefore sustaining to animals, plants, and humans who rely on it. It should be noted that as the fruit ripens, the fruit turns from green to yellow to red. So social media sites like Facebook have become the platform for exhibiting flag imagery, Oda dress styles, and particularly during cultural events and holidays. As we are well aware, Oromia is rich in fertile terrain, water resources, mineral deposits, and forests. And corporations who are attracted to Ethiopia's low labor costs and corporate taxes and the unregulated use of pesticides have made Ethiopia one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Evicted household members who received small compensation are now landless, often working in factories where they once owned farms. So there's a farmer on the bottom image there looking at his land being developed. Further, the pollution generated by factories have had significant health effects. As a result, millions of farmers and pastoralists are experiencing land loss, food insecurity, a loss of livelihood, and water pollution. And so we see during the Erecha protests that followed the Erecha massacre, the Oda symbolism there. As more and more people lose access to grazing lands, cattle herds are dying, and the use of leather in clothing is also dwindling. And so with the introduction of cotton, right, the cotton sadeta, the 8 yards of sheeting that's wrapped around the body, some of you are wearing. The sadeta is harnessed in place by the sabata. And so I want to spend a moment on the sabata because I think it's one of the richest body art practices that I learned about. And it's an imported, many of these are imported. They're not even woven in Ethiopia. And so I didn't really ask questions about it. It's kind of hidden under all of this folds of white. It's like, what is that belt about? I didn't think it was really that important. Here's a woman showing me how you tie the sadeta and then you add the sabata. This is a photograph from Philip Palichke from the 1880s, so you can see that the style of wear is still very similar today, the way in which it's tied on the shoulder. And so in researching Oromo genealogy, which took time, right, I was looking particularly at the way that the Gosas from Afran Kalo or Kalo come from. So I have Kalo written there. We can look at this and spend more time with it, but it's probably even hard to see where you're seating. And I'm just showing you genealogy because genealogy becomes important as it relates to this belt. And oral history, many people I met could remember, especially older generations, those in their 60s, knew 8 to 20 generations back, and they could tell me exactly how they were connected to even the great Oromo mother Hayomaitu in some cases. So this is the song that is sung at some weddings still today. I have it translated into English, when a mother is giving the belt to her daughter. So on her wedding day, the mother will tie the sabata around her waist, right? And in doing so, she enacts what the great Oromo mother did for women. What did she do? She prophesied land. So with each bind, each tie of the sabata, she granted land to Hunbana, Morawa, and Karayu, and Kalo, and so on. And so the places chosen by the mother are now clear. So girls may or may not know this today, but this binding connects back to this time in which land was distributed from the great Oromo mother, the mother of Afran Kalo, and it allowed. It was a claiming and legitimizing of the Barantuma homeland, and so it was kept there. You might even say hidden around a woman's waist. So that final tie of the sabata seals the location of the Kalo lineage. And as women are given it, they're repeating the actions of the Great Mother. Many Barantuma men and women, especially those who have been forcibly displaced and no longer receive proper education in traditional law, may not be consciously aware that a woman's waistcloth functions as a symbolic land deed that legitimizes parcels of land to be farmed and utilized for cattle grazing. However, the tying of a woman's sash is still an important rite of passage during marriage, a time when ora is most prominently worn. Whether or not the woman and her husband will ever be able to officially claim land as their own under current state legal procedures, they reenact this symbolic assertion of the right to inalienable land access inheritance. As places in Oromia are currently being partitioned and sold to outside investors, the visual tropes of the tree and the waistcloth are a means to link Oromo identity to the earth itself. And I want to just follow that progression from leather to cloth to now rayon in the machini, right? So machini coming from the word machine, the sewing machine, where you can purchase ready-made dresses of a variety of patterns in the marketplace. But notice with machini, you still have the folding, the pleating, right? So with sadeta, we expect to see that kind of accordion pleating folds. I asked elders about the pleating, and they told me this is where we hide our identity. We hide our identity in the leather that we tie the cow's legs with and in the pleats of the fold of a woman's dress. So it's a beautiful metaphor of, you know, this is where we keep ourselves in these folds. After I was in Harar, I was in RC region, looking at women's arts and performance among the RC. I actually have a sabbatical in next February and March to go to Oromia, and I want to look particularly at the Institute of Sike or Sinke, the way in which women use the stick in conflict resolution. And so I'm showing you some images of women who have come together with their Sinke. And, you know, the ways in which what women wear in their hair, super communicative in terms of their status. So kanafa, obviously they've given birth, gufta, suggesting they're married. All of these things are indicators of a woman's position. So women once played an important role as peacekeepers in restorative justice, where the whole community is involved in a collaborative and sustainable performance. One Leila Kashu suggests that RC women were expected to keep peace between Waka, God, Uma, nature, and society, as mandated in the Gada Constitution. Further, a woman is protected as an individual through collective reconciliation and traditional institutions like Atete and Sinke, which were performed to exercise her rights. Sike and Atete are interconnected with customary law, the Gada system, and Wakafana. They provide women with a means to act if laws have been broken and to restore peace and sacrality, or safu, in the community. When there is a lack of safu, a lack of balance and respect, there's a lack of peace. Without safu, there is violence. Factors like urbanization, loss of land, loss of education on Oromo law, and men and women's increasing insistence to maintain loyalty toward mosques and churches have led to a shift or crisis in safu. As a result, there is a drastic decline in performances like Atete and Sinke. And so that's one of the things I want to explore when I go in February is it still being practiced? Are women still utilizing this institution? And if not, why? I'm very sorry the print is off. This is Eastleigh in Nairobi. So I've also done research outside of Ethiopia, outside of Oromia, in refugee communities in Eastleigh and refugee camps. What I found in Eastleigh when I first went there, which was, I want to say 2006, I found Safalo Education Foundation, community members getting together, and everyone so thrilled to be able to speak Oromo language, perform Oromo dances, wear Oromo dress, and these are some examples of that. When I came back in 2010 and visited, what I found was this: women wearing hijab, women totally covered, and Oromo women, and not wanting to identify as Oromo. So there was a real shift, right? And I understand that fashion is always changing, but in this case, it wasn't so much about a religious identity, it was because they wanted to be hidden. They wanted to be hidden from the police who were coming over the border from Ethiopia looking for individuals. They wanted to be hidden as Oromo because to be Somali was a lot better. You got less harassment as a woman. And so this shift in dress I found really interesting. Since this time, this is Tuti, who I knew in Ethiopia. This is Tuti in Ethiopia. This is Tuti in Eastleigh. So you can see she's also dressing differently at that time. I'm going to skip these long quotes because they are too long. I'll show you a couple more images, and then we can go to questions. I've got lots more images if you want to see more, of course. But I want to suggest that despite the circumstances, whether we're talking today or we're talking about the time of Haile Selassie, these circumstances were occasions in which women, really women, were using dress to make sense of their experience, the experience of their families, their experience of their communities. And so regardless of whether we're classifying them as poor or not, this is an incredibly rich artistic expression. So I'm showing you Oromo women these are in Eastern Hararge. Here are young women in the marketplace in Wallo, Oromo women. Here are Arsi women, 3 generations of Oromo women. Wallo and Arsi again. And so you can get a sense of the empowerment and resiliency that they attribute to dress and cultural expression. And hair in Wallo, hair in Babile. And my daughter, also practicing Arecha with a friend in Los Angeles. So I'm going to stop there, but I just can't help it. I have to show you one more image, because I started this talk asking you to critically think about how do you want Oromo to be represented? How do you want Oromo to be represented? This is an art history textbook. It's a history of African art. And in the chapter called Eastern Africa, there's a photograph. Look at this photograph. Okay. Tell me what's wrong with this photograph. Don't look at the other image for a second, but can anyone identify what might be wrong with this image? So the caption says, Oromo girl selling bananas in the marketplace. No. First of all, look at the baskets, right? She's got a Harari basket in the back. Would you ever display it like this? No, it would always be displayed the other way. The non-functional side would be out. Would she sell bananas from this basket? No. Look at the karma, how it's placed on her head. It's also not correct. And then she's wearing a Somali necklace, and I'm showing you Somali women there in that historical image to show you it's not an Oromo necklace. So this is problematic. I know it doesn't seem like a big deal, but I think it is a big deal. So in this case, the photographer, who I happened to follow because to figure out what happened in this photo, the photographer had her own collection of jewelry. She's South African, she's white, she doesn't know about the Oromo. She came into the marketplace, found this girl, threw stuff on her, and took a picture. So it was completely falsified. Here's, Iftu wearing the karmalote, so you can see the appropriate way. Harari sitting room, so my students can see how baskets should really be displayed. And you can get a sense of even something this simple is a problem. And so it's important that we lend a critical eye, we speak up for these representations, and we make sure that, what's truthful and meaningful is what resides or continues. Thank you so much, Galatoma. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, I would like to thank Dr. Perry for that excellent information regarding our culture. It's an honor, Dr. Perry, to have you here with us. This is very significant. Dhugaa Rabbii aadaan teenya biyya dhalanne keessatti namni tuffatamnee waa'ee aadaa keenyaa ilmaan keenya illee hin beekani. Nuti illeen hagas mara hin beenu generationni keenya kun illeen waan tokko tokko buuka isii kana keessa yeroo laalu waan hedduu waan hin beekne waan hedduun bare. Waan hin beekne waa hedduun bare dhugaa galatooma Dr. Naomi fi Dr. Ilyas Maawardii fi warri buklabii hundi keessanuu waan kana yaada kana kanu dhiheessitanii irra hojjedhaa hedduu kreditii guddaa kan nuuf qabna. Dr. Perry waan kana hojjechuun isii kuni waa hedduu barree warri jettan hedduu galatooma. Dhugaa rabbii wanni nuti amma fakkeenyaaf akkuma reefu ibsu jirtutti hiikaa nuti hin beekne hiikaa dhoysaa waan hedduu aadaa teenya keessa jirtu buukasii kana keessatti yoo dhugaa bitattanii dubbistan waa hedduu bartan. Amma haxiixaa fi akkasitti keessa hinnaa godhanii fi kana hunda nuti gizee hedduu boonumaaf fudhanna. Isiin garuu boona qofaa miti. San budaallee namarraa akka dhorku namni gizee nama kana laalu fuula nama akkasitti straight laaluurra ijji nama akka haxiixaarra buutuu barbaadameeti. Budaafillee dawaadha jettee waa hedduu jira. Haxiixaan ammallee wanni irraa dhufte gaafa Haayila Sillaaseen waraana isaa ergeeti wattaaddaroota isaa ergeeti dubartoota babbareedduu dhiiras babbareedaa keessaa ukkaamsanii fuudhanii dhabamsiisu turanii ajjeesu turanii maalii wanni kun maaliif nurra gahee maaliif akkanatti namni keenya ijoolleen dardaraa fi dubaraatu nu jalaa akkanatti dhabamti dingata tanaafu waa godhuu qabna jaanii haxiixaa tana godhachuu jalqaban jette. Haxiixaa kana godhatan namni dhufan namni kuni bareedina nama silaa akkasitti intala bareedduu tana ni fudhanna yookaan gurbaa bareedaa kan ni fudhanna jaansan haxiixaa sanii jecha akka nama fokkotaatti waan mataan isaanii yaaduuf lubbuu isaanii baraaruuf haxiixaa tanallee itti fayyadamoonii turan jette. So waa hedduudha wanni achi keessa jiru. Tanaafu please buukasii kana bitadhaa dubbisa. Hedduu haa galatoomtu. We are very honored, Dr. Perry, to have you here again. This means a lot to us. We coming from a country that, as you know, I shouldn't tell you what our people went through. And then for a foreigner coming to our country and learning about our culture and putting it into a book is a big deal for us. Thank you so much for having you here. So itti aansee walaloon nu godhaa yoo rabbi jee walaloo tana xiqqoo dhaggeeffannee sagantaan teenyatti fufti.
Hi everyone, thank you for inviting me to share this poem that I've written with you. You see, a poem for the Oromo female freedom fighters by Antu Yaqub. Born into a world expecting her to produce life, passing light from the ancestors down to the future. Nobody told her her body was going to be torn, raped, beaten, used against her. They hoped her spirit was fragile enough to plunder. When chains restricted what her hands and feet could do, the river of Oromiya's blood propelled her anew. Her soul is like fire, lava, bishan, and air, wrapped in love and laced with venom. Leave it to the thieves, she should have perished lifetimes ago. But what they don't know is that the Akos and the Akakos spoke life into the holes their bullets left. The ones who came before her bore her strength that carried her name across countries, nationalities, and reached even me, an Americanized African, Oromo girl lost, relearning her mother tongue decades after I tossed it aside for the comfort of assimilation. What we know as the Oromo Nation would not be if not for her and Anisi. These women who sacrificed tenderness, tears, the warmth of a mother's embrace, or nectar of touching a lover's face, did so willingly to secure the freeing, the healing, the being of the Oromuma. They are why we are here. We stand on their shoulders. Their names reside in our consciousness, our hearts forever celebrating their excellence. May we possess a quarter of their tenacity, bravery, courage to breathe our dreams into existence, to claim and reclaim our resistance. Shot in the head, shot in the chest, did not matter. No bilisuma, no rest. They came back each time. Rivers became beds as trees shaded, hid them till the enemy's steps faded. From Baha, Lita, Kaba, Fikiba. History says the revolution was Ethiopian, but fighting the Derg, impossible without these women. Words can't hold what only stillness in their eyes speaks. The battles grazed not their grace, not their gates, not their confidence, not the souls their bodies hold. Their skin shines of Cushitic gold, dense, soft, malleable, and solid. Pressed through trials, hammered through tribulations, but never broken, never broken, never cracked under pressure. The flames of their love for our freedom enveloped the atmosphere. Finally, Oromo pride lives here. Never have I seen such brazen beauty than when Isi rose to recount the days. Her body was left for dead, carried by friends, moved by enemies, tended by doctors, released by soldiers, ordained by ancestors, stopped oppressors, stood for you and me. Isi, she, her, see her. They are why we are here. We stand on their shoulders. Their names reside in our consciousness, our hearts forever celebrating their excellence. May we possess a quarter of their tenacity, bravery, courage, to breathe our dreams into existence, to claim and reclaim our resistance. Thank you.
Maawardi fi Dr. Perin waa'ee buukasanii maawardiin waan dubbistee jecha keessaa waan agarte waan tokko tokko waliin discuss godhuu barbaadanii tanaafuu simadha galatooma.
Thank you for coming. We really appreciate you being here. Like Nabat mentioned, we read your book at a book club and we really enjoyed it. We really was so impressed with the work that you did in researching our culture and writing about it. we actually had a little gathering last week to talk about. It was about a year ago that we read your book, so I wanted to remember what we all talked about. I first wanted to tell you what our group members said when they first read your book and their impressions about your book. A lot of our book club members said that it's unfortunate that they didn't learn their culture when they grow up in Ethiopia. Because of a lot of factors, whether it's politics or religion, and that they, including myself, we grew up and were born there. We didn't learn as much as when we read your book. So we were very impressed, and you added a lot of value to the knowledge that we have about our culture. So we appreciate this book. And this book really taught us the significance of jewelry. Like, as you can see in this room right now, a lot of women are very well dressed with a lot of jewelry, and the significance of that jewelry and what it signifies. We never really understood that. We just took it as image of beauty, and it has multiple folds of meanings. The cultural, political significance that it had, it's not just a decoration. And specifically for women to be the image of Oromo in relation to men. And you don't see a lot of men wearing a lot of cultural significance items, so it's up to the women to be able to present the culture, and we really appreciated that. Another thing that we really were impressed by this book is you talk to a lot of people, and as you understood, Oromo is an oral culture. People talk about their culture from generation to generation. And there are some books that are written about Oromo culture, but this one, you did very well in putting together a folklore into a written cultural history so that our kids can learn the history. And here in America, very isolated from Ethiopia, that we do really appreciate the power of women that you have created. So now going into questions, I don't really have a lot of difficult questions for you. They're very general. First of all, we just wanted to know what made you write this book? What made you do research about specifically this area?
Okay, so the question is, why did I do this? Why did I write this book? When I was an undergraduate, I got to spend a year in West Africa. I went to the University of Ghana, fell in love with Africa. I knew I wanted to go back. And my advisor, when I was doing my dissertation, said, why don't you go somewhere else? So a place I learned absolutely nothing about the Horn of Africa. When I was in school, I thought I should go see it. So I had a trip planned to Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya. And I didn't have funding. I could only go to one. And I ended up going to Ethiopia. And I went with Opsi Ababia's daughter, and it was very eye-opening. And I think what struck me most was again, as I indicated, the time and energy and resources that women spent on their dress. So that was interesting to me. I fell in love with the culture. I loved the food. I liked that there were no malaria-carrying mosquitoes where I was doing research, and so it seemed like a good place to work. There also weren't, in Ghana, there are students looking under rocks for projects. There's so many students trying to find research projects. There's so few scholars that work on art in Ethiopia. In fact, those that work on art in Ethiopia work on Christian Highland paintings. And so that was appealing. The downside is that there were no books written about this. So I had to spend a lot of time taking oral histories and writing down history before I could even begin asking the questions about the artwork. So it took a lot longer.
In line with not having a lot of historical writings that you can rely on, I know there's a lot of work that you cite in your book. A lot of times, there are other Oromo historians that have written Oromo history, and they are very careful who they cite, because a lot of times the previous authors are biased. You know, they will refer to Oromo as Gala. They will have a very biased view of Oromo. You know, they say they're savages, they don't have cultures and things like that. So how did you navigate that challenge, not having a lot of writings to rely on, and finding writings that are there that were you able to see it right away that they were biased?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. A lot of work on the Oromo is biased, and so going in as a stranger, the proverb is, a stranger's eyes are wide, but they are blind. So I was blind. It took a long time to understand how to differentiate the writings. So I relied more heavily on oral histories. And oral histories can also be biased, of course, but if you take enough of them, you start to see a thread of truth. So I was challenged by an Ethiopian scholar in Oxford, where I did a book launch, who said, well, I don't really know if this is accurate historically. And I said, ultimately, that's not what matters. What matters is this is how people remember it. So what I'm writing is the understanding of people of their history. Whether, how it unfolded exactly is not of interest to me. What is interesting is, what stories do they want me to tell? And how can I do that in a form that makes it accessible to a Western audience? So this is a book that my students are reading. This is material that I teach to my students every semester. So it's hopefully reaching a lot of non-Oromo.
Thank you. In living among the Oromo, when you traveled there, I'm sure you learned a lot. What did you expect and what did you find? Can you tell us about your time there and what surprised you the most about your time there?
So I was most surprised at the depth and level of generosity of the people. I was living there at the time with my husband, no children, just two of us. We could afford to buy bottled water if we didn't have running water, even to bathe with if we had to. And we had people that we barely knew coming to the house, bringing water for us if we had 3 or 4 or 5 days without water. People were so honored that I was even asking or interested in their culture, that I wanted to know about what their grandmothers were wearing and grandfathers. And so I didn't expect to be as welcomed as I was, and I didn't expect people to be so generous with their interest in sharing with me all of these stories.
Thank you. And another general question I have is the title of the book. In the intro, there is a quote by a woman in a market that you met. It's similar to dressing modern like our mothers, but can you talk to us a little bit about the title and how you came up with that?
Yeah, this was actually something someone said to me when I asked, can you explain why women dress this way? It was actually a man. A man said to me, well, they're dressing modern, like my mother. And so, he didn't see a difference between what women wore then and now. It's all arts of the body. And so it is modern and contemporary. In fact, women want to be connected to cosmopolitan fashion, but they also are doing it within prescribed codes of conduct. In other words, when it's appropriate to innovate, they innovate. Notice the upper body wearing the polyester t-shirt, whereas the sadeta, the bottom half of the body, tends to be more the traditional space. So they'll do it within ways that are culturally appropriate, but they're still maintaining that language of dress that I think is continuous throughout the generations.
Thank you. Another fascination that I had about the book was Motik Orke. I was just so interested to learn about her because growing up back home, my mom would say when one of our kids, they cry a lot, she says, Motik Orke, go away, And I never knew the meaning. I thought Moti is king and Orke is a lid for soda bottle back home. And I didn't know the significance of Motik Orkia. I never asked her. And after I read the book, I was just so amazed by the history of this woman king. And it's just so amazing. Like it's so many folds, learning about women leader and how she was, they signify her in history whenever people talk about her. So I asked my mom, I said, who is Motik Orki? And she said, oh, it is a woman king who everybody hated. Nobody wanted, and they just wanted her to be gone, and she was gone. So can you tell us a little bit about Motik Orki and the significance of a woman king? I don't think that she's a queen. I don't know. It's mostly referred to as a woman ruler. I haven't heard of another woman king in Oromo history except for her. Can you talk a little bit about her?
Yeah, the stories I wrote about her are really what I know, and so she's been connected to Yudit in the Amharic tradition. She's been connected to other stories of female rulers who acted maliciously and shrewdly, and justifies why women shouldn't rule. Look, she was a terrible ruler, and so what I found interesting is her connection to wildebeest. So these women actually showed me a picture of a wildebeest. Like, this is the animal that she's associated with, because this is the animal that tore her body parts. And whether or not it's used to justify why women can't rule, I don't know. But I found it interesting that her body, when it was torn, was distributed in different places in the region. So people know, oh, that's where her thigh bone was. That's where her shoulder is. And so they also there's a connection between the body and landscape. And I'm interested in connections between the body and landscape. So I found that part really interesting. And people's stories about her are wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question that we had was, how did you see, especially, seeing in the late 90s and the 2000s, seeing modernization, you saw when people moved to Kenya to come to the US, religion, how did that affect jewelry making and the making of art in Oromo women day-to-day tradition? Because I think in the book you talk a lot about how especially young Oromo women spend a lot of time making the beads, making all of these art, and it is a very intricate art that I feel like in modern days we just buy it from the store. We don't really make them anymore. How do you see that? Do you think it's modernization, people moving away from their homes and not practicing their culture as much?
Right, so what was happening in the late 90s and early 2000s is that people were being displaced. People were moving, right? They were forcibly moving, they were living as refugees. They no longer had the ability to sit down and plait a basket. They didn't have a lot of stuff. And so body art becomes more important because as people are mobile, it's what they can carry, it's the symbols they have on their own person. And so there's that part of it. And then there's the fact that, metal bowls and other things came in plastic and replaced a lot of the hand-woven, hand-produced. And so body art's become more of the pastime, I think. That's just anecdotal, yeah. Are we asking audience questions?
Yeah. That is all the questions I have. I don't know if we have any questions from the audience that we can participate. Gaaffii yoo qabaatan.
Dubarree jirra galatooma Dr. Berin galatooma Maawardi galatooma meequ takka harka nu dhawaafi. Maawardi ta arkitan kana dhaltee guyyaa torbaan lama isiiti garaa baqeeffattee dhaltee inshuraansii illee hin qabnu asitti nu qufte akka itti gooteen beeku maawardii rabbi si haa eegu fayyaa dahii ulmaa leencaa hamaan sin harkatin ijoollee si guddattee tanu xoortu nu haa godhu galatooma. Amma gaa wannattiin isin deebisa ammallee reefuuniin dagadhee naa'umiin galatoomi jechuun barbaada. Dr. Perry mana isiin nu fudhattee nu tajaajilu jirti guyyaa sadeen kana isii airportii raayis fuudhee isiitutti deebisaasi dalagaa guddoo irra keenyee mana nu bantee akka wahalle nu banteetti rabbiin akka niyyaa keetitti wahalle si haa banu Dr. Naomiiti. Ammallee waa guddaa warra harkitee haadha warra Haacaaluutiif qopheessee horee waan kana qopheessitee jirtu hunda keessaa hawaasa Oromoo Leeyilaa atii fi hawaasa keetii horee waasuun qopheessee maqaa dhaaba keenyaatii fi akkasumatti maqaa Minisootaa hundatti si galateeffanna isin hunda galateeffanna.
Dhaabni kun akkuma beektanii dhaaba dubartii baha Oromiyaati. Gaggeessituun dhaaba kanaa gubbaa koree 13 eega ijaarame bara 2018 ijaarame. Akkuma ijaarametti bara 2019tti kunoo warri dura jalqabe gaa Haboo Zayituunaa fa'aa hedduu dhaaba kana asiin warri gahee isaanii haa galatoomanii keessaa Haboo Zayituunaan hedduu waan kana akka nuti jabeessinee fuula dura oofnu gizee hunda isiitu nu jajjabeessee asiin nu gahe. Bara 2019tti dhiifama biyya dheeyxee gaa waanuma isin funaantanii itti kennitaniin faamilii nama maatii nama 7 qubachiistee akka manni ijaaramee fi warra gaafa Somaalee fi Oromoo daangaa irratti wallalanii uummata keenya achirraa buqqaasan achi dheeyxee waan taateef gaa faamilii nama 7 akka qubatanii alarraa manatti galan hedduu tattaaffii guddaa warra godhee warra bu'aa guddaa uummata keenya keessatti gumaacherraa Haboo Zayituunaadha. Haa galatoomtuu mee harka owwaanaa kan naaf haguutan. So manneen ijaaraman kanneen fakkaatanii maatii akkanaa nama 7 ilmaan tokkichaan isaanii toora nama 7 nama 8 nama 9 qaban faamilii gaa ati yoo akkam xiqqaate nama 70 ka ta'u jechu ka gargaarame mana 7 ijaarame kanaani kanatti aansinee bara 2020 wanni goone barsiisne waa'ee fayyaa dubartii waa'ee maatii waa'ee draaga addictionii warra draaga amma deemaa jiru kana ijoolleen lafaa ol kaatituun tokko tokko soosaayitii teenya keessaas akkuma beektanitti wanni kun haraaraa ijoollee takka takkatti taatee sammuu isaanii jeeqxee jirti barnoota sanillee kanninee turre waa'ee kanaa warra muuxannoo qaban warra ogumsa sammuu fayyaa sammuu baratan akka Dr. Naomi faa afeerree turre sanirratti barumsa akka kannan ammallee dubartiin ammallee jabaattee fuula dura akka if dandeessee jabaattee ifiin mirgasii ifiin himattee mataa ol qabattee akka ifiin boontus akkuma ammaan tana agartanitti obboleettiin teenya maawardiin looyara teenya barattee bakka guddaa biyya tana keessatti digrii seeraa qabdi. Isillee afeerree egaa akka ijoollee dubartii amma lafaa kaatu tana nu jajjabeessitu waan tokko tokko qophii qopheessine sanarratti isillee sagantaarra hirmaattee turte. Hundi keessanuu galatoomaa ammallee waa'ee maatii jaarsaa fi jaartiin akkamitti bultii tana keessatti wal gorsanii walii obsanii yookaan haadhaa fi abbaanuu ilmaanii wajji akkamitti walii galanii waliin ilmaan kana guddisuu danda'an waan jedhuuf sanirrattis afeerree turre warra muuxannoo qaban bara san jechuun bara 2020 baruma san keessa mallee ijoollee hiriira baatee hiriira irratti miidhamte toora gaafa Hacaaluun ajjeefamee sanii so ijoollee miidhamte saniifillee waan dandeenyu walitti qabnee qeerroo fi qarreellee gargaarree turre. Qeerroo gargaarree keessa Harargee qeerroo 10 qarree 18 abbaa ilmaan 6 Walloo kan du'elleen ni jira faamiliin du'elleen kanarraa gargaarsa waan taateefuu waanuma isin nu gargaartanii nu amantanii nu kennitan sanumarraahi isaan gargaaruu dandeenye hanga xiqqaallee ta'u bu'aa hedduu qaba ture wanni isin gumaachitan hedduu galatoomaa hundi keessanuu. Kunooti ammaan tana warra gaafa san maallaqa ergineefirraa viidiyoo asirraa nu dabarsanii jiranii fuula isaanii akkan argamneef hin cufe warra tumamee qaama keessa miidhaan irra ga'e isaanillee waan taateefuu isaan ga'ee jira wanni ergine viidiyoo nu erganii jiranii. Bara 2021 dubartoota qabsoo keessatti warra kufanii fi warra mallee miidhamanii warra qaamaanillee as Ameerikaa kana daayaspooraa kana jiran afeerree qopheessinee fi qaamaan warra as dhufuu dandeeyu haga tokko afeerree galatoomaa jenneeni waan dandeenyu goonee isaanii waliinillee hedduu guyyaa gaarii dabarsinee turre akkuma beeytanitti aadde Aslii Urjii Dhaabaa Tigist Aaliyaa Shankoor Rabbi jannata haati tahu irratti hirmaatanii turanii kunooti Aaliyaa Shankoor irra nu keessa jiranii aadde Aaliyaan Rabbiin jannataan haa qananeessu akkasumatti Asliilleen guyyaa sangaa haasawallee gootee turte isin hundinuu quba qabdanii barammoo 2022 guyyaa dubartootaa kabajnee turre guyyaa dubartootaa san irratti dalagaa rabbii gaa guyyuma nuti kabajne san dura jaalle Aaliyaan akhiramanii turanii rabbi rahmata haa godhuu fi sagantaa sanillee gaa dabarsuu hin dandeenye waan duraan qabanneef hirmaataan hanqas malallee namni hirmaachuu dhabullee sagantaan sirriitti dabre isillee yaadannee guyyaa dubartootaa sanirratti araarallee kadhannee fi dubartoota nu jecha waa meeqa keessa dabranii miidhaa qaamarra ga'een gaa guyyaa san akhiramanii jechuudhaan isillee guyyaa san meenshin goonee maqaa kaasnee kabajnee turre akkasumatti illee guyyaa dubartootaa waan ta'eef dubartoota shanyii biraa warra biyya biraa amma takka gurraattiin tunis doktara maali pirezidaantii dhadhiifama pirezidaantii biyya Afrikaa the first woman dubartoota irraa jalqaba pirezidaantii isillee waa'ee isillee haasofnee turre isin tunillee Ameerikaadhaa ta dura koongirasii filamtee bara 1916 akka dubartoonni sagalee kan nu danda'anii mirga harkatan ta mormitee waan kana asiin geesse jennee jara biraallee dudubbannee turre arragaa bara kana hunugaa Dr. Peerii asitti akkuma duraan dubbannetti Dr. Naomi fi Maawardii fi hundi isaaniitu Iliyaasii Ja'iitii nutti dhufanii ni yaada kana yaada gaariidha jennee asiin geenye hedduu hundi keessanuu galatoomaa Iliyaas Ussoo fi Maawardiillee hedduu galatoomfachuu barbaanna sponsora warri nu godhe isaanii har'a hanga tokko warra nyaataan nu gargaaraniin cinatti warra mana kana dekoreet godhuu irratti isin hundinuu warri dhuftanii har'a irratti hirmaattan hedduu kabajaa guddaa qabdan fuula durallee inshaallah saba keenyaaf tattaafannee waa godhuu qabna hanga harka meeqanuutu isaan irra jira biiti teenya beelaanis waa hundaanuu hedduu dararamaa jirti waan dandeenyu godhuuf walumaan hojjechuu qabna hundi keenyaa hunjaa inshaallah gizee dhufnee isin gaafannetti waan dandeessanii nu cinaa dhaabbattanii jirtanii kun hundinuu isiniin malee waa tokko namni lamaa fi sadii godhuu hin danda'u. Hedduu galatooma fuula durallee inshallah plaana qabna. Plaana yoo Rabbi jee Oromiyaatti bakka takka filannee akkasitti bishaan baasuu yaadu qabna. Bakka bishaan hin jirretti akka uummanni keenya bishaan harkatu hedduu beelaa fi hongeen uummata keenya hedduu darartee jirti numa agartanii Oromiyaan hundinuu beelaan rakkachaa jirti. Tanaafuu bishaan jennuu kanaas isinitti dhufna fuula dura irratti marihanna akka nu cinaa dhaabbatan illee abdii qabna. Hedduu galatooma. Thank you Dr. Perry for being with us again. It was an honor. We will keep in touch in the future as well. Thank you so much.
Hayyega galatooma isin hundinuu dhufiinsa keessatti nabaat galatoomi dalagaa jabduu daleedan warri koree keessaa waan kana akka gaarii dalagee keessaa Na'iima galatoomi siin jenna dursi galatoomi Samiiraa isaan afran kanaatiitu akka gaariitti waan kana akka qophaa'u godhee irra dalagee galatooma isin afranu wanni biraa Dr. Iliyaas waan OROMIA11 expensive cufa isaan nu dandee responsora nu godhe galatoomi Dr. Iliyaas galatoomi siin jenna ammallee mana keessanii nageessinaa galchuu hanga gizee biraa waan biraa waliin garnu yeroo gaarii qabaattan abdiin qaba akka qabaattan abdiin qaba nagayaan naa galaaga.
Biyatia sofintu injirtu damuati Oromia Igalman Oromoti Oromia Inkuftu Oromia Inkuftu Injitu Inkuftu Injitu Lamuati Biyatia Inkuftu Injitu Lamuati Lamuati Injitu Lamuati Agobaran sirra gaba. Agobaran
Agobara sirragaba. Agobara sirragaba.
Mukhagara.
Mabalagaba.
Mukhagara.
Eder suma balagaba. Sumagami garigaba. Bara sirragaba. Asri garigaba. Rigaba. Amagami. Asbahime agobar. Asbahime. Asbahime. Asbahime.
Hawaasni addunyaa tokko haala gaariidhaan guddatee jireenya gaarii jiraachuudhaaf waan tokkotti haajama fayyaa hawaasaati. COVID-19 baroota dabran kana keessa lubbuu nagaa miliyoonatti lakkaa'amtu dhabamsiisee hawaasa addunyaa diinagdee burkuteessee jira. Lubbuu miliyoona 7tti dhiyaattu dachiirraa godaansisee lubbuu miliyoona 700tti dhiyaattu immoo dhukkubsee dawaa fudhachiisaa jira. Qabeenyi sababa COVID-19tiin dhabame ni argama. Hojiin sababa COVID-19tiin dhabames ni deebi'a. Daldalli cufames ni banama. Daandiiwwan cufaman hundis ni banamu. Manneen jireenyaa, manneen amantaa, manneen nyaataatis deebi'anii banamu. Wanti yeroo tokko yoo bade deebi'ee hin banamne garuu lubbuu tantee qaaliidha. Kanaafuu of eeggannoowwan COVID-19 barbaachisan hunda godhuudhaan lubbuu tantee qaalii kan maatii keetii, kan firoottan keetii, hiriyoottan keetii fi ollaa kan keetii eeguu hin dagatin.